Hello and welcome to the Waynesburg Effect, the only political talk show right here on WCTV. Today we will dive into the midterm elections. We'll discuss the U.S. Senate and which party will take the Senate, with a special look in the PA race against Bob Casey and Lou Barletta. We will also talk about the U.S. House and local races such as Connor Lamb and Keith Rothfuss, and we will begin to wrap up as we move to the state government, including the vicious fight for governor and local races such as Pam Snyder versus Betsy Rohanna McClure. Today, we will also have special interviews with the political director of Dale Kearns, who is running for the U.S. Senate, Waynesburg Student Senate President Tyler McCoy, and Waynesburg professor Dr. Larry Stratton. I'm your host, Emily Bennett, joined by Michael Capelli, Dakota Kiefer, and Drew Rhea. So sit back and relax and enjoy some heated discussions right here on the Waynesburg Effect. You don't know what's going to happen with the hurricane. You cannot predict its path.
And he didn't clearly understand what his job was there to do.
And that's sad because he's just a statistic now.
Total lunacy.
It's an alarming statistic.
That ended up winning the National League to face the Red Sox in the World Series.
But clearly he didn't understand the context of the speech.
If you haven't heard me talk about this yet, I'm sorry.
Come on, people now, smile on your brother, everybody get together, try to love one another right now.
Can I help you?
Oh, I'm depression. I've come for you.
What?
Depression. You know, the thing that makes people angry. I keep them up at night. Oh, I give them anxiety. You know, I get up on their heads.
That's
Crazy. I know. The government likes to think that I'm a mental illness.
Well, then shouldn't you be wearing a cape?
Why? So people could see me coming? No, I've got 12.6% of American college students already. There's no one I can't get.
For more information, visit www.acha.org.
Oh, sweet. Pizza.
What the?
Hey, how about you try this banana?
Gee, thank you.
No problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot better.
If you be good to your body, it will be good to you. Make smart choices when selecting what you will eat. Visit choosemyplate.gov for more information on the best foods to bring out the best you.
To start off today's show, we will dive into the U.S. Senate. Dakota, we'll start with you. Who do you think is really going to take the Senate?
Well, Republicans enter midterms with a 51-49 majority lead in the Senate, obviously. We know that. But really looking at it, there's an 83% chance the Republicans keep control of the Senate. Not very good chances for Democrats in general for the Senate. It's going to be very difficult for them. They have an uphill battle as there are 26 Democratic seats up for election as opposed to only 9 Republican seats up for election. And this includes 10 Democrats up for re-election in states that Donald Trump won in 2016. So it's going to be very difficult for the Democrats, and it's going to be very unlikely, to put it simply. They'll need a near-perfect November for them to take control of the Senate, and they'll need to win most or maybe even all of the current states: West Virginia, North Dakota, Missouri, Montana, Indiana, and Florida. And they'll also need to win Republican-held seats in Nevada and Arizona. So it's going to be really difficult, not looking good for the Democrats in terms of the Senate. 2 races that I want to look at real quick. Florida's a race that's probably going to end up being close, with former Governor Rick Scott challenging Bill Nelson, as his governor term is going to be over after this year. So he threw his hat into the race, and he has a lot more money than Nelson. And I think in this race, money is going to play a key factor. The last I looked, he's outspending Nelson at a 4-to-1 rate. So that's something that I think is going to be key in Florida. Nelson is a popular candidate, but when it comes to the money, it's hard to outspend someone. And also, Scott was a popular governor. He even won some Democrats over after the Parkland shootings when he actually challenged the NRA. So I think it's going to be difficult in Florida too, but it's going to be close. And then Arizona's another race that may be a toss-up after Jeff Flake retired. Martha McSally prevailed pretty easily in the GOP primary, so she's going up against Kristen Sinema, the Democrat. And Sinema was off to a really good start at first, but now the gap is closed, so it's going to be close in Arizona as well.
Yeah, like you said, Dakota, the Democrats are going to be really hard-pressed to take the Senate in this year's election. Of the 35 seats that are up for election, 18 are going into the election solid Democrats. So the likelihood of you winning all of those back, let alone gaining seats on the Republicans, is going to be very tough. I think that when we look back at this election, we will see that the Republicans will hold the Senate. Michael? Anything?
Yeah, no, I agree with you guys there, but specifically within Pennsylvania, the race between Bob Casey and Lou Barletta, I think, is an interesting one. I think it leans more to the side of Bob Casey, and for a couple reasons. One, Barletta has not a lot of campaign funding. Four private citizens from across the state have donated $9,000 to his campaign, and that's more than all outside GOP groups combined. Overall, the outside GOP groups have donated $8,224 to his campaign, and that's obviously less than just those four private citizens. But what they're doing is they're spending all their money just opposing Bob Casey. They're not really backing Barletta, they just don't want Casey to win. But Barletta hopes that his stature as an illegal immigration hardliner and his support of President Donald Trump will help him in the long run with this race.
Now, what do you guys think with Democrats are going to be hard-pressed to win this, as it is, but do you think it's going to be even harder after the Kavanaugh confirmation that the Republicans are really, that really jolted them and really is going to get them to the polls? Do you think that's going to play any factor in this?
I think ultimately, if the Democrats would have, if the confirmation process for Kavanaugh would have been calm and would have been, even keel, I think the Democrats would have had an easier time taking seats in the Senate and the House. But because it was sort of a last-second wake-up call maybe for Republicans that might jolt the Republican base, especially Donald Trump's base, into voting Republican, ultimately we'll see. I don't want to, overstep or insinuate that the importance of that, but I think that could play an important role.
I think it'll go both ways. I think Democrats will come out to vote more because of the whole situation, but I also think Republicans will. And I think in the end that'll still help Republicans. They are expected to win anyways. So if more Republicans come out, even if more Democrats come out, it's going to balance itself out. So in the end, it's really been a lit a fire under Democrats and Republicans, but I think Republicans will come out as much as Democrats come out, and I think Republicans in the end still win no matter what.
What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Dakota. I think it's going to impact both, but I really think Democrats are angry about the whole Kavanaugh situation. So I think that there will be some good showings sporadically throughout the entire map. But I do think Republicans ultimately will end up winning.
So what do you guys think? We're going to make some bold predictions about who's going to win races. What do you think, Drew?
Bold prediction for the U.S. Senate race out of Pennsylvania. I believe Bob Casey wins handily, and I believe Dale Kearns, the Libertarian, gives Lou Barletta a challenge for second place because, unfortunately, just Lou, I don't think is the candidate for Pennsylvania.
Is it bold to go for Casey, though? Because
No, my bold prediction lies more in the Libertarian. I think you could see a solid 10, 15 upwards %, and that, I think, will make a bold statement to the state Republicans that they need to do better as far as conservative candidates.
My bold prediction, I'm going to go Bill Nelson is going to defeat Rick Scott, which is going to be very difficult because I mentioned the money earlier, but they're both pretty popular in Florida, and I think that Nelson is still really popular, and I think he ends up defeating Scott.
I have a little comment there. I mean, the Hurricane Michael just hit, and Governor Scott has had so much TV time, news coverage of how he's handling it. Do you think that's going to play a role in that election, too?
I do think it will help Scott, but I still think ultimately Nelson, he's been really popular. He's been there since 2000. I think it's going to help him, and I still think he'll end up winning. It'll be very close, though.
Now, what do you think of the PA race?
Casey. I mean, it's not going to be very close.
My unbold prediction is that Bob Casey wins Pennsylvania. I think if I were a gambling man, I would put money on Bob Casey winning that race. I think it's hands down going to be him. Although I do like Drew's comment about Kearns challenging Barletta for second place. I'm curious to see how that plays out, actually.
I mean, you can't really go anything. I'll go, obviously, Bob Casey. But I'm thinking, going off of Dakota for the Florida race, I think Rick Scott's got this. I mean, yes, he's pouring all his money in, but I think that the hurricane is actually, I hate that it says it's going to benefit him, because obviously we don't want a hurricane to benefit anybody. But I do think that he's going to keep a spot as governor there. But when we come back, we're going to have Drew Rhea sitting down with the political director for Dale Kearns right here on the Waynesburg Effect.
Welcome into another edition of Jacket Sports Weekly.
Homecoming game against Carnegie Mellon. And finally, Hugh, we're starting to see this offense put together some drives and really...
We kind of saw the offense just compile together and have a great showing. Chad Walker, 61 rushing yards and a touchdown. And the receivers, it just wasn't one main guy. It was Colbooth, John.
25-23 and 25-18. But perhaps the biggest takeaway in that match, all of whom had season highs. They only had one block in the entirety of the match.
We run our best race at regionals, we can make it to nationals.
Continuously see him. We saw him a couple weeks ago. Game-clinching interception for the football team.
Stress can affect every part of life. It cripples your ability to concentrate, causes you to feel fatigued, and drains your energy. When stress affects the brain with its many nerve connections, the rest of the body feels the impact as well. Exercise and other physical activity produces endorphins, chemicals in the brain that act as natural painkillers, and improve the ability to sleep, which in turn reduces stress. Even 5 minutes of aerobic exercise can stimulate anti-anxiety effects. For more ways to reduce stress, visit Anxiety and Depression Association of America's website at www.adaa.org.
So when you say you're a libertarian, people react differently.
Right.
A lot of the times you get the question, why?
Right.
So what is your why?
So the biggest reason that I'm a libertarian is I don't feel that the two ideologies that we're presented with, of liberal or conservative, are all encompassing. I don't think that the political parties as they stand are able to accurately represent the ideas of 330 million people in the United States. And so I think that out of all the ideologies, libertarianism is the one that is most consistent. Is we take some ideas from Democrats and some ideas from Republicans, although in a lot of ways they take their ideas from us. But it's just the idea that you should be left alone, that as long as you're not harming another person, you should be able to do as you so wish. And I think that within a large amount of people is a libertarianism to an extent. And a lot of people, I would say a majority of people, are libertarians. In fact, some polling has showed that at least 2/3 of Americans identify as socially liberal, fiscally conservative. And so when people say that, they don't know that there's this option. But innate in them, they have this libertarianism. So I think it's the consistent ideology, and that's the big reason that I've become a libertarian. When it comes to other sorts of voters, whether it's disgruntled Republicans, Democrats, or independents, it's a matter of figuring out what is the most effective way to message our campaign. And so as the political director, I'm second in command on the campaign to John Odermatt, who is the campaign manager, and he's done an excellent job over the last year. But John, Dale, and I have worked in concert together to put together a campaign that can appeal to all people. It's easy enough to be a libertarian and talk about all these antiquities and all these specificities about libertarianism and talk about Mises and Hayek, but appealing to a large swath of people that can win an election, a different coalition, a diverse coalition, is a challenging thing that a lot of libertarians haven't succeeded in doing. So in my role in the campaign, that's what I've tried to do. I've dabbled in a lot of different things on the campaigns, from creating graphics and ads, but the big thing that I do is messaging our campaign to as big a group as we possibly can.
So you mentioned that a lot of libertarians are a lot of libertarian candidates are cut from that same mold. What makes Dale different? Because I've followed the campaign for a while, ever since I was introduced to Dale running. So what makes Dale different and this campaign different?
I think that what makes Dale different is that he is such an interesting story, and his unique story is what brought him to libertarianism. He's somebody who grew up in a very difficult situation with a number of family members who've dealt with addiction and have dealt with broken homes, and he himself has worked most of his life, let alone his adult life, but from the time he was able to function as a young adult, he was working to support his brothers and his family. And these issues, particularly addiction is not a crime, the opioid epidemic, means something to him. And as a libertarian candidate, he's sort of been pushed into running. It's not something I don't think he wants to do. That's one of the big reasons he talks about he only wants to serve one term. He doesn't want to take the pension. Is he's doing this for disinterested reasons. He is about as regular a blue-collar worker as it gets, because he hasn't taken off any time, basically, from his real job to run this campaign. He's working 50 to 60 hours a week as an electrical contractor while this campaign is going on to support his two daughters and his wife and his family. And so I think it's extremely admirable that he is someone who's going to Washington to represent the every person, not just any number of special interests. That's what makes Dale Kearns very special in my estimation. We had to get 5,000 valid signatures to get on the ballot. And so in order to get that, because you can be challenged by Republicans and Democrats, we had to get more like 15,000 signatures, which is very difficult to do. It takes up a large amount of your resources. If you look at third-party candidates around the country, over half of the resources that are used toward ballot access. That's just getting on the ballot. So after doing that, and we were able to survive any challenges, in fact, we had so many that they didn't even bother, is that after that, then the campaign actually starts, that you're actually on the ballot. And then from that point, the pollsters, if they want to be kind, they'll finally say, all right, we'll put you on the ballots for polling purposes. That's the other thing, is, as you may have seen, is there's been one debate so far between the two of the U.S. Senate candidates, and we have one more coming up in Pittsburgh at KDKA. But we haven't been permitted to participate in those debates because we haven't been polling well enough. But the problem is that we haven't even been included in polls to begin with.
So more specifically, what challenges have you faced from the other campaigns in this race, whether it be from Senator Casey or Representative Barletta or even other, I know the Green Party has a candidate.
Right. Yeah, well, the big thing is that, for example, in these debates that I just mentioned, is that the Republican and Democratic candidates make agreements with the news stations that they will be the only candidates who will appear in these debates. So in a lot of ways, even if the news stations wanted to invite us, the candidates could perhaps say, all right, we won't debate then. And so the Republicans and Democrats get this leeway to control the narrative. And in so many ways, the other ways are that there haven't been many times when Representative Barletta or Senator Casey have been in the same room as Dale Kearns. And in a lot of ways, that's by design.
How early, both in the state and nationally, do you believe that the Libertarian Party can challenge the two-party system?
Well, I think that we're really challenging it now, and I think that we're going to make a big dent on Election Day. And I think that continuing forward, as we increase our exposure and more people see the advantage of the Libertarian Party, as people get more fed up with the two-party system, is that we're, I think, as early as next year and early as 2020, if you were talking about even years, is I think that we got 3.3%, which was the best by a presidential candidate who was a third party in 20 years. I think that we're only going to build on that in 2020. I think we have a number of very viable candidates looking at the presidency, and I think that it's going to be a very positive election. We're going to have Senate candidates, and we're going to have gubernatorial candidates. We've already have 800 different candidates across the country in the Libertarian Party running this year. I think it's only going to get better from there. And as we get more people, we have more viable options. That's the big problem with a third party, is when you're small and it's tough to run, you have to recruit, people who are just activists, who don't have experience as candidates. We're getting people who are well crafted, people who are polished, and people who know how to run campaigns. And that will continue into the next few years and into the next few decades. Not that long ago, I was a college student as well. I just graduated from the University of Pittsburgh in 2013 before going to law school. As a student, I know that there are a number of concerns that a number of you have. Whether it's the war on drugs and how it incarcerates disproportionately people of color or poorer people, whether it's the student loan crisis, whether it's the immigration crisis at the border. I know that students have particular views that are not addressed by either Bob Casey, who's been in Washington for over a decade at this point, or Lou Barletta, who's also been in Congress for quite a while. Neither of these candidates are really addressing what students have to say and what they have to feel. They don't think that it's worth their time to talk to young people. But here, as I speak on behalf of Dale Kearns and the Libertarian Party, we care about young people. We know that you vote, and we know that you are the future of this country. That's why, as part of our campaign, we feel that we uniquely appeal to young people. We're talking about ending the war on drugs, legalizing marijuana on the federal level to make sure people aren't put in prison for what they do to themselves without harming another person. We've talked about abolishing ICE to make sure that human beings are treated as such and that they are not deemed illegal by a government. We're talking about addressing the student loan crisis by making sure that the federal government stops handing out predatory loans and pushing college students into taking out more money than they should and leaving them with thousands and thousands of dollars of debt and with a degree that they can't use. If you vote for Dale Kearns for U.S. Senate, you're voting for someone who cares about you as an individual and as a young person. And while Democrats and Republicans might think that they are entitled to your vote, libertarians are appreciative for every single vote that you give. And while there might be wasted votes for Democrats and Republicans who will just continue the same old system year after year, you know that a vote for libertarians will be genuine and will be worth something, not just this year, but the year after that and for the rest of your life.
You can't do anything right. Stupid. You're the biggest
Just
moron
give up.
I know.
Stop trying. There's no point to it. You're never going to be anything.
What is wrong with you?
Why even bother? I mean, you won't amount to anything.
You're a failure. Trash.
Just give up.
You're worth nothing. You will never amount to anything. You are not worth anything.
Welcome back to the Waynesburg Effect. We are now joined on the desk by Joe Smelter. Welcome. We're going to switch topics now to the U.S. House. Drew, what do you think the Democrats' chances are at winning the House?
So the Democrats' chances are pretty good when we're looking at the House in this midterm election. The 538 has the Democrats with a 5 and 6 chance at 84.1% of taking the House. And there's an 80% chance that Democrats gain anywhere between 19 to 60 seats. So to steal the term, there's most likely going to be a blue wave in the House looking at overall across America in this midterm election.
What about you, Michael? What do you think?
No, I agree with him. I think Democrats are polling well across the nation, so I definitely think they win the House far and away. And then I think we're going to see an interesting contrast, because if Republicans win the Senate and Democrats win the House, it's just going to kind of back and forth between each other, and it's might not end the best, but we'll have to wait and see.
Now, historically, it's shown that the president's party typically loses seats in the midterm election, which obviously we're on the track for that happening. But what do you think about if the Democrats take the House? Looking at the role of women, really, women are definitely taking more power in the House for sure. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I could definitely see that, and that's just us moving forward. I think as a society, you'll see a bigger diversity between race lines, between gender lines. So I think that is certainly a good thing. Diversity in our House, and I think you'll see that after this election and moving forward, even whether you're looking at 2020, 2022. I certainly think that that's something that will happen and will continue to happen. Joe?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a sign of us moving forward with the emphasis, I guess you can say, on diversity and not only race but gender as well. You kind of hit the nail on the head, so I don't really have too much to add to your statements on that. But yeah, I think women moving forward is definitely going to play a big role in the Congress. So.
Do you think the Democrats are going to take the House in this election?
Yes, I absolutely do. I think that there's a good chance that the Republicans take the Senate, and as you mentioned, with the president's party losing seats, Donald Trump is obviously a Republican. So I just don't see the Republicans keeping both the House and Senate. I think that, especially in the House, I don't really see any way that there isn't a blue wave in the House of Representatives. So the Senate will stay red, and the House will turn blue, so to speak. So that's my take on that.
So switching to kind of more local Pennsylvania, Joe, kind of lead us in talking about Connor Lamb versus Keith Rothfuss.
Yeah, I don't see any way Connor Lamb doesn't win this election against Keith Rothfuss. Lamb, obviously a Democrat, kind of ran through the door when Tim Murphy had his scandal, and he ran in the special election against Rick Saccone, got the win, and he's kind of been rolling from there. So I think Lamb, as a Republican, I am a big fan of Connor Lamb. I think he's a moderate Democrat, and that's not only a part of his personality, that's really what he emphasizes as a candidate. So I just think that people can easily, from both parties, can get behind Connor Lamb, and I don't see how Keith Rothfuss competes with that.
Drew, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think much of the same of what Joe said, and that's not to discredit Keith Rothfuss as a candidate or as an elected official, but I really do think that Connor Lamb runs away with this election, has a 19 and 20 chance, according to 538. So I think it's going to, I don't want to say it's going to be a landslide, but it's overwhelmingly Connor Lamb right now.
Like Joe said, Connor Lamb he's a moderate Democrat. As a Democrat, I support Connor Lamb. I think from what I've read about him, I've gone to some of his events. He leads a lot of bipartisan efforts, so I really think he's willing to work with Republicans on a lot of key issues, and I think that's something that we need to have, honestly.
For sure. Now we're going to switch a little bit to Bibiana Boyer versus Guy, as we just call him here, because let's be honest, politicians always have the weirdest last names. But anyway, talk about that race and what you think is going to happen with that.
So even more lopsided, I believe, than the Connor Lamb, Keith Rothfuss, this time in favor of the Republican. Guy Rushenthaler, right now at a 99.1% chance of winning. So I think he's really dominated that race. If you remember back to the special election, he was actually the Republican's second choice behind Rick Saccone to go against Connor Lamb. So you see both of those, both Connor Lamb and Guy Rushenthaler are now leading their races. So they'll both most likely be in the House of Representatives.
Yeah, I think both Guy Rushenthaler and Connor Lamb kind of have common ground in that they both have victories over Rick Saccone. I don't think this election is very close. Guy is projected to win by about 8% in the primaries. He'll kind of just ride the momentum from beating Saccone and kind of win this election going away with a similar margin of victory as Connor Lamb will. So.
I mean, yeah, they kind of nailed it there. There's not really a whole lot more to say. I mean, Guy Rushenthaler really runs away with this race. But what I'm curious is that, you know, we have two very lopsided races. And what I'm curious to see is if these men are elected, what they do when they get in Congress as far as defense spending. Because from what I've read about the Congress as a whole, that's what they really like to do is defense spending, defense spending, defense spending. And I don't know why we do so much of it. Honestly, I think we should invest a little bit more into education or, you know, that little thing called the opioid epidemic that is just running rampant through our nation and that we're not really addressing.
We've been seeing more on a local level, people talking about the opioid epidemic, but we really have not seen this. They always are just talking about health care, you know, different taxes and stuff, which obviously is important, but, you know, that gets a little, they gotta get into more topics and stuff. But as we start wrapping this up, any bold predictions, not just more locally, but in the House at all?
Bold prediction in the House. Let's go with this. Keith Rothfuss will make it closer than expected against Conor Lamb. I don't think he beats Conor Lamb. I think he makes it slightly closer than expected.
Jeff.
I think Lamb exceeds the polls in his margin of victory, so kind of the opposite of what Drew said there. So I really think he's going to run away with it.
Okay.
I'm going to take a note off of Drew there, and I think Boero is going to make it a lot closer with Guy Rushenthaler.
Now, do you think her being the only woman running for Congress in Western PA, do you think that is going to give her a little bit of a push?
It's tough to say. It might, I think, because, you know, I've tried to talk to some women in the community about, you know, issues about voting. I think it might, but it's really tough to say.
Okay, I'm just gonna go, Conor Lamb's gonna run away. There's nothing bold about this. I mean, it's just happening. But when we come back, Drew will sit down with Waynesburg Student Senate President Tyler McCoy right here on the Waynesburg Effect.
Can I help you?
Oh, I'm depression. I've come for you.
What?
Depression. You know, the thing that makes people angry. I keep them up at night. Oh, I give them anxiety. You know, I get up on their heads.
That's
crazy. I know. The government likes to think that I'm a mental illness.
Well, then shouldn't you be wearing a cape?
Why? So people could see me coming? No, I've got 12.6% of American college students already. There's no one I can't get.
For more information, visit www.acha.org.
Oh, sweet. Pizza. What the? Hey, how about you try this banana? Gee, thank you. No problem. Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot better.
If you be good to your body, it will be good to you. Make smart choices when selecting what you will eat. Visit choosemyplate.gov for more information on the best foods to bring out the best you.
We're back on the Waynesburg Effect. I'm Drew Rias, sitting down with Waynesburg Student Senate President Tyler McCoy. Tyler, let's get right into it. What do you believe is the key for both the Democrats and the Republicans heading into this midterm election?
Yeah, so for both of them, I think it's important, and they have this right now, but to keep their bases energized. So actually, the Supreme Court hearings really got both bases moving. The Democrats, of course, were angry that Kavanaugh was confirmed, and then on the other side, the Republicans felt that Kavanaugh had been mistreated. So the bases are excited. I think that's important. Obviously, each party needs to stay on message about what keeps them excited. The Supreme Court, immigration, healthcare, the economy, jobs, and then also wooing moderates, because you have those bases already are excited to vote. But now the question is, who's going to push the party over the finish line? So will moderates go for the Democrats because they're unhappy with Trump, or will the moderates go for Republicans because they might not like what the Democrats are offering? So I think those are the key things for both parties right now. And I think both of them are running before the Democrats had the momentum, but now I think both of them have a lot of momentum behind them. And that's what's going to be key for them. They're going to have to keep that through November.
So you spoke about, keeping the base energized, and that's a big thing, especially for the Trump administration. How do you see President Trump playing a role in these midterms overall?
Yeah, so Trump definitely has a base. I would almost say there's a Trump base. It's not necessarily a Republican base. So these are people loyal to Trump. These are people who maybe have voted Democrat for Democrats in the past. And so Trump has a huge part to play in that, and he's played a huge part in that. He holds these campaign-style rallies more than other presidents have. He goes into states that Republicans need to win, so Montana, where you have these vulnerable Democrats. And it's important because especially in those vulnerable states, the Democrats that are vulnerable, these are blue-collar Democrats. These are Democrats that attract union votes, that attract votes that traditionally, or that Trump has tried to pry away from the Democratic Party. So Trump has a huge part in that, and keeping that base energized and making sure people get out to vote. Because a lot of people, they're not super excited, about Mitch McConnell, or they're not super excited about the Speaker, Paul Ryan, although he's retiring. But Trump's what gets them going on the Republican side often. So I think he has a huge role to play.
So more specifically, in your role as a political student leader on campus, what do you believe is the importance of the college vote in this election?
Yeah, so the college vote is important. College students and just voters overall generally are not as excited at midterms just because you don't have that person that you look to in a presidential election. So, people are excited to vote for, President Trump or Secretary Clinton in 2016, and then they would vote down ballot as well. But there's really, on each side, you don't have that person running. So college students, I would say especially, are more prone to not vote in the midterms. However, a lot of younger people I know are unhappy, although this isn't entirely true across the board, but a lot of younger people are energized for the Democrats. And so it'll be interesting to see where the college vote lies, kind of the percentages there, because this is traditionally an election where people wouldn't be excited, especially on college campuses. But in this situation, because we live in such a politicized and polarized world, we might actually see an uptick in those voter in college students voting.
Okay, so looking more towards Pennsylvania, more locally, do you believe either Scott Wagner or Lou Barletta can replace incumbent Democrats in their governor and Senate races, respectively?
That's a good question. I'm not sure they can. Obviously, any incumbent has an incumbent's advantage. So even Democrats that are more vulnerable, which I don't think the Democrats in Pennsylvania are particularly vulnerable, but they still have even the ones who are vulnerable have that incumbent advantage. So it'll be interesting to see. Governor or Senator Casey and the governor are, I think they have a good chance of winning, and I think it'll be difficult to unseat them, especially in Pennsylvania, where Pennsylvania did vote for Trump in 2016, but before that it had pretty consistently voted for Democrats for a couple election cycles. So it'll be interesting to see if the Republicans can keep a hold of Pennsylvania, or if they lose it and it was maybe kind of a blip just in 2016.
Do you see the recent shuffling of district lines in Pennsylvania playing a huge part in this year's election, or do you think that's more of a future problem?
It might play a part. It might help a couple seats swing as things are more balanced now, whereas before they were more gerrymandered and districts were more prone to go one way over the other. But I think overall, Pennsylvania, it's a national race to see who can take the House. And I don't think gerrymandering is it's not something that gets people excited. So, the redistricting has been done. There'll be some differences from it, but I've actually not heard a lot of people talking about it. I think it was kind of, they did it, it's finished. Yeah. You're going to have some shuffling, but after November, I don't think it might flip a few seats, but not too many, I don't think.
Which race or which candidate is most intriguing to you, either as a student or just someone entering the job field, in the immediate future?
Yeah. So the races that I think are really interesting are these vulnerable Democrats running for Senate. So a local example would be Joe Manchin in West Virginia. It'll be interesting to see if they can hold on because they're in states. You've got Claire McCaskill in Missouri, for example, as well. They're in these states that went for Trump, but they are these kind of blue-collar Democratic politicians that appeal to the exact same groups of people that voted for Trump. So those are the ones that I'm really interested in. And then it's always, people don't think of it as much, but state house races and state governors races are important because that's what Republicans did for many years is they didn't have the presidency. So they focused a lot of energy on getting state house races and governor's mansions, and they've been able to implement a lot of policy on the local level. And I think Democrats are starting to realize that Republicans were able to do that. So now Democrats are focusing on those races as well. So it'll be interesting to see too how power goes at the state level. Will the Democrats in my state of Ohio, will the Democrats be able to take the governorship? And it's a close race, and it's possible that they will. Even though the outgoing Republican governor, John Kasich, is very popular, it's neck and neck. So that'll be interesting as well to see.
So I know it's early, but if you could give a quick projection of who you think the Democrats will run in 2020, looking forward to the next presidential race.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm really not sure, to be honest. So you have these kind of exciting candidates coming from the Senate. You have Senator Harris and Senator Booker, and they would energize the base. I think Senator Sanders is I'm not sure if he would be able to again. And then Elizabeth Warren as well, she's tripped up, especially with the Native American ancestry questions that have surrounded her. This morning I saw a question, will Mike Bloomberg run in the Democratic Party? So I think there's definitely room for someone who we're not talking about right now to come and become the front runner in the Democratic primary. And because even the senators that are exciting, they might energize a base, but can they energize enough voters to become the nominee? And then is the Democratic Party, would Senator Booker or Senator Harris be able to have national appeal and kind of bring back those voters that the Democrats lost in 2016?
All right, well, thank you very much for joining us, Tyler.
Certainly.
Stay tuned, you're watching The Waynesburg Effect.
You can't do anything right.
Stupid.
You're the biggest
Just
moron
give up.
I know.
Stop trying. There's no point to it. You're never going
What
to
is
be
wrong
anything.
with you?
Why even bother? I mean, you won't amount to anything.
You're a failure. Trash.
Just give up.
You're worth nothing. You will never amount to anything. You are not worth anything.
We're back on the Waynesburg Effect, and now we're going to dive into the vicious Pennsylvania governor race. We're going to start with Joe. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, vicious is definitely a word for it. We've all probably seen Scott Wagner's now infamous golf spikes ad against Governor Tom Wolf. And I just think it's so telling that Wolf has not done a good job, in my opinion, as governor of Pennsylvania. And I think his approval ratings reflect that. In all the polls I've seen, his approval rating is well under 50%. Yet he's supposed to get reelected in a landslide without even breaking a sweat. Scott Wagner's just, he's so far out there. Like, I don't even know how to describe him. He'd be more fit, I think, for the WWE with his promo delivery than he would be for the governor of Pennsylvania. So I hate to say it because I don't really want to see Wolf get reelected. I don't think he's a great governor. I think he's very bland as well. But there's nothing really stopping him. Scott Wagner, just not a good choice.
Yeah, good, Dakota.
Yeah, honestly, I really just want to know what the Republicans were thinking of when he made it through the primaries. It's fascinating. He's a terrible candidate. He really is. He doesn't have anything that really stands out in terms of his political views because, I mean, they're a little bit crazy at times, but he himself is what's crazy. I mean, his political ad about the golf spikes, It was confusing. He said a catcher's mask, and then he had golf spikes instead of baseball spikes. I don't know what he was going for there, and I don't understand the direct threat. That's really not setting a good precedent. I mean, yeah, we've seen President Trump do some weird things like that, but this, for going for a governor's race, I don't understand it, and I don't understand how he made it through. He's a terrible candidate. It's really not going to be close, honestly. I mean, the spread right now is around 17 points. I don't think Wolf really has to sweat anything because he's going to win pretty handily without having to do much.
Yeah, Dakota, like you said, I really don't know how the Republican Party arrived at Scott Wagner being their guy. I mean, you look at the other candidates in the primaries. Paul Mango, who I believed was the best candidate to face Tom Wolf, and I believe would have defeated Tom Wolf because he had, first off, had more common sense, as we've seen now, but he also, stood behind his policies. Wagner doesn't really stand behind his policies, and I think that's a lot of the problem with him and Lou Barletta is both of them stand more behind the fact that they're supported by Trump and that they're big Trump guys instead of their actual policy. Other candidates, Mike Turzai, who's been in the State House, seasoned Republican, and Laura Ellsworth, who's, I believe she's been a lawyer in Pittsburgh for over 25 years. All three fantastic candidates. And for some reason, before the primaries, the state Republicans decided to throw all of their money behind Scott Wagner, which I don't even agree with in the first place. If you're going to hold a primary election, how about letting the people in your party, in your state, actually elect the person instead of putting money behind one candidate before the election even happens? That's how you end up with candidates like Scott Wagner and Lou Barletta, who I believe don't accurately represent the Republicans in Pennsylvania. So when looking at this governor's race, really, if you're a conservative, if you care about conservative ideals, I can't see how you can vote for Scott Wagner. It looks like he almost took a camera out by himself and did this video.
Yeah, it looked very unprofessional.
It looked like in a back lot somewhere. That's what I was joking about with our producer, Mitch. He was just in a back lot somewhere filming himself. It was weird.
How did anyone else okay that? You know what I mean? I think he just sent it. I think he recorded it himself and sent it out. It's really a joke. Ken Krawchuk, on the other hand, the Libertarian candidate, I think would best represent most conservatives in this race. So that's personally who I would vote for in this race. So, like I said, most likely Wolf in a landslide, which is just absurd with an approval rating of like 36% as a governor.
It is shocking to me that the Republican Party didn't. Wolf is not liked, so the Republican Party had a really good chance if they put that certain candidate out there to win. But then you've got Wagner, he speaks down to people. Yeah. He's so disrespectful. I don't want to make that Trump comparison, but the way he speaks to people is similar. I actually got to meet him, and it was just, he did not impress me in any way, shape, or form. But switching to the state government in general, what do you think kind of that balance of power and some of the key issues in the state government?
I think a big thing in the state government is education, and we've heard that even growing up through at least me, through our public education system. And that's really where the Republicans had a golden opportunity to win the governor's race, is if they put an actual focus on education in Pennsylvania.
And I think that's part of the reason Pat Toomey did not get reelected.
Toomey?
Or I'm sorry, Tom Corbett.
Yes, Corbett, yes.
Tom Corbett, former
yeah,
governor.
no.
Wow.
No, I agree with you. I think Corbett was extremely weak on education. And, a candidate like Paul Mango would have been better. I got the chance to hear him talk a lot, and he was big on education, and Scott Wagner's just big on himself and Donald Trump. And unfortunately, the state GOP decided to go with him over people who would have pushed education more, and who I believe all three of the other candidates would have challenged Tom Wolf more.
I think something else you have to look at is obviously how the districts will change after the 2020 census. Yep. And obviously with Wolf expected to win, and he pretty much will win, it'll change more in the favor of the Democrats. We already seen a change earlier this year to favor the Democrats a little bit. So I think that's another thing in terms of balance of power. That'll really be something to look forward to after the 2020 census comes out, when they get a good look at where people are living now, where most Democrats are living, where most Republicans are living, and how they want to mess with the districts a little bit. I think that's something to really look at in the next coming years if Wolf wins, and he probably will.
Switching things kind of locally, we love to talk about Pam Snyder here in Greene County, but let's talk about her race versus McClure. We saw this race 2 years ago, and it was actually a lot closer than people think. So what do you think is going to happen this year?
I think Betsy Rohanna McClure is going to have another strong showing. As a first-time candidate in 2016, McClure did quite well. She got 46% of the vote, which is very respectable, especially going against somebody who is as popular in Greene County as Pam Snyder is. And I don't see any reason to believe that she won't kind of get closer. I don't think she's going to win, but I think the vote will be even closer in 2018 than it was in 2016. McClure's been very aggressive in her campaign. If you go around Greene County, you'll see signs kind of everywhere. So I think she's gotten better as a candidate in the past 2 years. I still don't think she's strong enough to win that election, but I think the gap's going to narrow even closer.
I completely agree. I think that it'll be very close, within maybe 1 to 2%. I wouldn't be surprised. McClure is actually a very good candidate, especially around here. We mentioned earlier in the show about the opioid epidemic. Well, she's very big on trying to solve that little by little, to have it, I don't know, maybe solved. It's hard to solve something like that, but she's very big, and that means a lot in the community around here in Greene County, Fayette County. There's a huge opioid crisis. And that's something that means a lot. She's very respectable in the community. She's really close with families around the community. Obviously, as Joe mentioned, I see a lot more McClure signs than I do with Snyder signs now. Maybe some of that has to do with Snyder already being elected, and maybe she doesn't need to campaign as much. But it'll be very close, and I think McClure is a very good candidate opposing Snyder, which is something that hasn't happened in the past couple of years besides McClure back in 2016.
Yeah, I had the privilege of meeting Betsy last year, actually working on the Gene Rush campaign, and Betsy's a fantastic candidate. I think she makes a real good push, and I think there's a really close election.
We're close. Bold predictions for state government. Dakota.
Wouldn't be surprised if McClure somehow pulled off an upset and won.
Okay. Joe.
I think McClure is going to get 48% of the vote. I'm kind of going with a statistic. I think she's going to inch closer, but that's my prediction. And she'll lose narrowly to Pam Snyder. So,
I'm going to double down on my libertarian candidates and say that Ken Krawchuk pulls a surprising number in the governor's race.
Okay. I'm going to go Pam Snyder. She's going to win by 1 or 2%. It's going to be a lot closer than what people think. But don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right here on the Waynesburg Effect.
Welcome into another edition of Jagged Sports Weekly.
Homecoming game against Carnegie Mellon. And finally, Hugh, we're starting to see this offense put together some drives and really...
We kind of saw the offense just compile together and have a great showing. Chad Walker, 61 rushing yards and a touchdown. And the receivers, it just wasn't one main guy. It was Colbooth, Joan.
25-23 and 25-18. But perhaps the biggest takeaway in that match, all of whom had season highs. They only had one block in the entirety of the match.
We run our best race at regionals, we can make it to nationals.
Continuously see him. We saw him a couple weeks ago. Game-clinching interception for the football team.
Stress can affect every part of life. It cripples your ability to concentrate, causes you to feel fatigued, and drains your energy. When stress affects the brain with its many nerve connections, the rest of the body feels the impact as well. Exercise and other physical activity produces endorphins, chemicals in the brain that act as natural painkillers, and improve the ability to sleep, which in turn reduces stress. Even 5 minutes of aerobic exercise can stimulate anti-anxiety effects. For more ways to reduce stress, visit Anxiety and Depression Association of America's website at www.adaa.org.
We're back on the Waynesburg Effect. To wrap things up today, we are going to do our personal endorsements, starting with Drew.
All right, so if you can't tell already, I'm behind a lot of libertarian candidates for this election cycle. To start, Dale Kearns for Senate. Dale is someone who is in this race for a reason. He's in it for a personal reason. Dale's lost a lot of family members to drugs and the opioid epidemic. His biggest thing is to end the war on drugs. Legalize freedom's another one of his big things. And third-party candidates in general, I think, deserve more recognition because in races like the Senate election where you have two candidates that a lot of people don't side with, and you need more variety. So for that reason, Dale is a fantastic candidate. If you don't know about Dale Kearns yet, please go look him up and read up on his issues, because I think you'll be really impressed, especially, you know, in our college age range of 18 to 22, he's a fiscal conservative and socially more liberal. So I think that fits a lot of people in our age range. So I think Dale Kearns is a fantastic candidate. And in the same breath, Ken Krawchuk for governor. We talked about Scott Wagner's failings. As a conservative, I'm very disappointed in Scott Wagner's campaign, and I think Ken Krawchuk better represents me and better represents conservatives across the state. So I think, you know, when we're looking at candidates, don't forget about the Libertarian. Don't forget about every other party that's on the ballot. You know, these people are on the ballot for a reason. They're not just throwaways. And a lot of times, whether you're looking at polls that like to exclude third parties, or you're looking at debates that if a third party candidate's even invited to a debate, one of the two parties will drop out instantly. So I think when you look at a lot of the publicity of elections, third party candidates are overlooked and often ignored and excluded. Don't do that when you're at the voting station come November 6th.
So for me, I'm going to endorse Governor Tom Wolf. I know he wasn't very effective early on in his term, but he also kept fighting for what he thought was right, and I respect that in someone. And I think the state finances in Pennsylvania are in a lot better shape than they were. There's also been improvements in government efficiency. A lot of things socially. There's now medical marijuana, which was a big issue and is a big issue going across the country. As medical marijuana is legalized. And also, I just don't think Wagner is a very good candidate, and I would never find myself voting for him. I think he's crazy, if we're being honest. The whole Golf Spikes ad, we talked about it. I can't vote for someone that would do that, and I could never see Governor Wolf doing something like that. I think he's respectable. He didn't have a great start, but I think he's improving. And he obviously still has room for improvement, but I think he's done a decent job in a very difficult political climate that we're in the country and in the state. And don't vote for Wagner.
Jeez, Golf Spikes Wagner really strikes a lot of fear in people, doesn't he? I'm going to endorse Bob Casey. I really like this guy. I really agree with where he stands on a lot of key issues. So, for instance, his stance on abortion, he runs as a pro-life Democrat, which I think appeals to a lot of Republicans. Casey told Politico earlier this year that being a pro-life Democrat means that you're trying to focus on ways to reduce the number of abortions, but you still try to find ways for family planning, whereas some other candidates just want to get rid of all of it altogether. When it comes to education, he's called for more funding for public education and opposed vouchers that would divert taxpayer money toward private schools. When it comes to health care, he repeatedly voted against bills that would repeal Obamacare, and I'm a huge advocate of affordable health care, and I really like where he's trying to take the Affordable Health Care Act.
Thank you, Michael. We have former panelists here, Joe Smeltzer. He is endorsing Connor Lamb and Guy Reschenthaler for the U.S. House. Moving to me, we're going to go local here. We're going to keep it here in Greene County. I'm endorsing Pam Snyder. She has been, she's kind of a staple of this community. She's been very involved in the community. She was served 9 years as the Greene County Commissioner. Everyone knows her. She's such a personable person. If you ever just meet her, she's just someone you can have a conversation with. And that's hard to say about some politicians. You just don't feel like they're approachable. Very approachable. She really is combating the drug epidemic. But I do think that she's going to have a lot harder of a time than people think in this election. And I kind of think that people think that she's just a shoo-in, and that's going to hurt her. Because people, whether they don't go out to vote or they just think, oh, like, whatever. And when it comes down to it, I think it's going to be very close, but I do think she's going to take it, and I hope she does. She's a great woman. But as we wrap things up, don't forget to vote. Go out to the polls November 6th, and make sure you tune in to us next time for more political debates right here on WCTV.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.